Even if you have a tiny garden or a patio or a balcony or even just a doorstep, there's something which you can do now to guarantee an abundance of colour early next spring, and it's got something to do with lasagna. So this is a really cool idea for small spaces, and what you need is some grit, a selection of bulbs, and a nice deep wide container like this, and then some multi-purpose compost. And so let me just explain how this works, and you'll soon see what I mean by lasagna. So you basically layer the bulbs. So I've decided the first layer at the bottom, they're going to be tulips, and this is because these are going to flower the latest. And the next layer in the middle are going to be the flowers which flower halfway through the whole process, and these are going to be the daffodils, which will be coming in around March time. And then the layer on top is what's going to appear first in February, and that's going to be the snowdrops. So the first step is to use some grit, and you want to create a 5 centimetre layer on the bottom, and this is just going to really help with drainage. Now I've put the grit down, the next step is to get some of the multi-purpose compost, and I'm going to pour this out and create a layer around 5 to 7 centimetres deep. And you don't have to be exact, but it just really helps to have a nice layer of compost for the tulip roots to get into. The first layer of bulbs is going to be the tulips, which fingers crossed will come out in April. I'm just going to place these down fairly close to one another, but you don't want them to ever be touching each other. I've now finished placing the bulbs for the first layer, and I'm going to get this compost and cover these and have kind of estimate 2 to 3 centimetres of compost above the tips of the bulbs, and then that will make the second layer. Whenever you put the next layer of compost down, just use your hand to level it off nicely so you've got a nice flat base for the next bulbs. And these are the daffodils, which I'm going to plant in the exact same way as I did for the tulips. So the daffodils are in now, and these should hopefully be flowering in March. So remember, the bottom layer with the tulips flowering in April, middle layer for March for the daffodils, and the top layer where the snowdrops are going to go. And again, I'm just going to cover this. I'm now going to leave kind of a 5 centimetre layer of compost above the tips of these bulbs. Now you might be wondering, how are all these going to grow when you've stacked them? And it's remarkable. What they do is that they just grow past each other and flower, and that's the magical thing about this. And as well with the bulbs, you just don't need to press them down. Lay them on top of the compost and cover them, and it honestly couldn't be easier. Last but not least, the final layer, and that's going to be the snowdrops. Now the great thing about this kind of setup of lasagna planting bulbs is you can kind of mix and match what bulbs you want to grow. So for example, instead of growing snowdrops, you could do crocus instead, as those come out in February. Or for example, the daffodil layer, you can use hyacinth and get the early flowering varieties. It's really nice to have that option and to see what bulbs you really want to have growing right by your doorstep. And now it's time for the final layer of compost, and you can really see what we mean by lasagna, because we had the grit, and then we had the compost bulbs, compost bulbs, compost bulbs, and then compost. And for this last layer, put around 5 centimetres or so over the top. These are smaller bulbs, so they don't need that much. But the most important thing is you want to make sure that when you're covering these, you leave a gap in between the top of the pot and the base, just so it means it can soak up the water when it rains, rather than the water draining from the sides. The two final steps you need to take is to firstly move your pot into a shaded area and then give it a really good water. And you want to move it into a shady area because once you water it like this, the pot's going to be a lot heavier. Now in terms of frosts, these bulbs are pretty tolerant, but if you get anything really extreme, then there's no harm in taking it indoors when you have the frosts, and then when they go away you can then move it back outside, and then when it comes to January you take it out of the shady place and into a nice prime sunny location such as right by your doorstep, and then keep your fingers crossed and wait for the blooms from February until March, April or possibly even May. And that is how easy it is to use the lasagna planting method to grow your own bulbs. And this is just perfect if you want something really easy to do and you want a load of colour early on in spring. And everything you've seen in this video is available at your local Dobbies or at dobbies.com. So enjoy it.